Hello, welcome back to another lesson on Computer Hardware and OS Essentials lecture series. I created these custom lectures based on A+ certification program, but with few enhancements to improve your IT technical skills and knowledge. So if you haven't seen my previous videos, I will post a link in the description for the playlist. This would be our 18th lecture in which I will cover basic concepts related to installing Windows. The primary objectives of this lecture is to plan a Windows installation, learn about how we can install Windows 11, Windows 10, Windows 8.1 and Windows 7, configuration basics of Windows settings after installation, and describe special concerns when installing Windows in a large enterprise. Remember, these lectures are basically lectures associated with the fundamental concepts for A+ certification program. If you want to understand some of these concepts, you have to go through the labs and practical hands-on training so that you will get a better understanding of the concept that we cover. So basically this is a theory lecture. I will post some practical examples videos later on my YouTube channel. How to plan a Windows installation. Situations require a Windows installation includes installing a new hard drive, existing Windows version has become corrupted and you need to install a new operating systems to make it work. Operating system upgrades. So those are three major reasons why you may want to install a new Windows installation. Many decisions need to be made before the installation, and most of these decisions apply to any Windows operating systems, regardless of whether it's a operating system for enterprise business environment or whether the operating system is being installed on a home environment. Choosing the edition, license and version. OEM, also known as Original Equipment Manufacturer or Retail License, one of the types of licenses that you can purchase. You can purchase a retail license or an original equipment manufacturer, also known as OEM license, from a retail store. And the options for both of these types of licenses includes 32-bit and 64-bit versions, even in Windows 11. Key differences between original equipment manufacturer and retail includes the OEM license is for builders and manufacturers of computers and can be installed only on a new computer. OEM allows all hardware upgrades except for an upgrade to a different model of motherboard. In other words, you can install an OEM license on a system that you just built, and then you can change any component of that system except the motherboard itself. An OEM license costs less than a retail license, and one of the reasons for being it doesn't have these nice shiny packages. Typically it comes in like a black and white box or like a box that basically cardboard box. Retail licenses can be purchased from Microsoft Online Store. And the benefit of retail license over OEM is that it can be transferred to a different computer and you can get Microsoft direct support from Microsoft support personnel. So if you buy OEM licenses, you may not have certain support avenues. But I found in Canada, when I build a new computer, I typically buy a OEM license and I can still speak to a Microsoft support personnel if I need to transfer that license to a new device. So even though by default OEM licenses cannot be moved to a new motherboard, you can speak to a Microsoft support personnel, and if your motherboard fail, you still can be able to transfer that OEM license to a new motherboard by speaking to them. So these are just general information related to key differences between OEM and retail, but not necessarily the same if you go through the proper support channels. And again, this is based on as of 2022 August. So Microsoft as a company may change the policies and how they handle OEM licenses and retail licenses. So if you are purchasing a brand new computer, it will come with the OEM license already installed. But if you're building a computer or a server yourself, you probably can buy either the retail license or OEM license. So in my situation, I can easily purchase an OEM license. So I will go with the OEM because I know what I'm doing. So I don't need the Microsoft additional support, for example. So it is a decision that you have to make as a computer technician. 32-bit or 64-bit architecture. So I have already discussed this in my motherboard lecture, as well as my some of my lectures previously that I have already posted to my YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen those examples that I have already explained, you can go ahead and check my YouTube channel. There are already posted information on this, but this is a general overview. So the 64-bit installation generally performs better than the 32-bit installation and can also support 64-bit applications which run faster. And 64-bit installations of Windows require 64-bit device drivers and must have enough RAM to support 64-bit installations, because typically the 64-bit installations require more RAM than 32-bit installations. And keep in mind, the 64-bit installation still can run 32-bit programs because it has an emulator already built into it. However, 32-bit installations of operating system cannot handle 64-bit programs and architecture, because it's not upward compatible. So if you install 64-bit operating system, it is backward compatible for 32-bit, but if you install 32-bit installation, it is not forward compatible for 64-bit installation. So programs. So keep that in mind. So this is why in 2022 we will always recommend installing 64-bit architecture. So here is an example using Windows 10 and Windows 8 and Windows 7. As you can see, the 32-bit architecture only need about 4 GB of RAM, compared to 64-bit architecture can go a higher bit of RAM support. So keep that in mind when you're installing those items. So this is just an example of showing how it is different from 32-bit to 64-bit, just on a table. So when it's come to the point Windows 11, again, it has still 32-bit support, because one of the biggest thing Microsoft Corporation does is the backward compatibility. So you can install 32-bit, but again, I assume that now we are in 2022 August at this point, you will probably going to install 64-bit architecture. So as the time of this video publication, there are Windows 11 64-bit versions for Home, Pro, Education, Enterprise Pro, Education, Pro for Workstation, and Mixed Reality. So you may be already familiar with the Home all the way to the Pro Workstation. So all of these items are probably something that you're familiar with. Something that is new to Windows 11 in 2022 is the Windows 11 Mixed Reality Edition. The Windows 11 Mixed Reality Edition is a new edition for Windows 11 that may be added soon. So as of now, there's in the discussion of adding it. And this edition is specifically designed for mixed reality or virtual reality devices like Microsoft HoloLens, I believe it's called. So keep that in mind when you are looking at those different editions. They are constantly changing. So this is something that's in the works that has not yet been released, but it will be released soon by Microsoft for mixed reality options. So if you are building a mixed reality device, you may want to consider that option as well. Verifying the system qualifies for Windows. Consider the minimum hardware requirements for Windows 11, Windows 10, 8, 7, whatever the Windows versions you are installing. Keep in mind, beginning with the Windows 8, Microsoft requires 3 technologies to be used by processors. That includes NX, PAE, and SSE2. You don't need to know exactly what that means, because the reason for being all processors built in the last 10 years use these technologies. So you don't have to worry about, buying a new processor not supporting NX, PAE, and SSE2 standards. And in A+ certification program, you do not need to know the details of processor architecture. That is much more advanced than what you need to know. So we just need to know that beginning with the Windows 8, your processor cannot be older than probably 10 to 11 years. So that's the maximum oldest processor you can install. MBR or GPT partition system. So you may have heard these two terms in the industry. So the Windows can use one of the two methods to partition the hard drive, one called the master boot record, also known as MBR, the other one called GUID partition table or GPT. Windows is always installed on a volume that use the NTFS file system. So the Windows support two boot types, master boot record or the GUID partition table, and Windows always get installed as an NTFS file system. For most installation, install Windows on the only hard drive in the computer and allocate all space to one partition that Windows setup call the drive C. So the installs Windows in the C drive, so under the folder Windows. So basically the C would be the main drive, the root drive, and then the Windows folder will be the one that hosting the Windows the installation files. Again, I have already gone through this in my previous lecture, in this lecture series on lecture 17. So if you don't remember, just go ahead and watch that lecture 17, and that will explain a little bit more detail on how the hierarchy of boot drives and folders works. BIOS UEFI firmware on the motherboard. To understand if a system qualifies for Windows 11, 10, 8, 7 or any version of Windows, it helps to understand how Windows relates to hardware by using device drivers and firmware on the motherboard. So when the system turns on, the motherboard BIOS or UEFI manages essential devices such as keyboard, monitor and hard drive. Motherboard BIOS UEFI is contained on a chip on the motherboard and it is called a firmware chip. Basically, when you press the power button, the very first thing kicks in is the BIOS UEFI firmware program. Then it will hand over that to the operating system when the operating system start going, but that's the first thing happen when you power it on. All modern motherboards as of 2022 use UEFI, which is stand for Unified Extendable Firmware Interface. UEFI is a much more improved replacement for BIOS, which known as the basic input-output system. And the BIOS is typically doesn't have any graphical GUI. It is basically text-based, either have a blue or black screen or gray screen with text on it, as opposed to UEFI have a graphical user interface. Also, the UEFI offers legacy support for BIOS compatibility, and I have already gone through this in a little bit more detail on my previous lectures associated with this computer hardware and OS essentials lecture series. So if you don't remember some of the items, the differences between UEFI and BIOS, please go back to my YouTube channel and watch my previous lectures on BIOS and UEFI, and as well as the motherboard that I have already covered. Motherboard UEFI BIOS provides three functions. Those are System BIOS UEFI, which contains instructions for running hardware devices before an operating system has been started, because as soon as you turn on the power, the BIOS has to kick in. Startup BIOS UEFI, which starts the computer and finds a boot drive device that contains an operating system and then turns the startup process over to the operating system. So the startup BIOS UEFI is the one that is going to hand over the system hardware components to the operating systems after the initial boot up process has been completed. Setup BIOS UEFI is used to change motherboard settings. So this can be used to enable or disable devices on the motherboard, change date and time, or select the order of boot devices for startup BIOS to search. So this should read change date, not data. So these are basically three major functions of the BIOS and UEFI. So basically these are not three different firmware, these are exact same firmware, and within this firmware it can do the System BIOS UEFI functions, Startup BIOS UEFI functions, and Setup BIOS UEFI functions. For your A+ certification program, you should know these three functions in separately, but also know that these are all part of the one single UEFI or BIOS firmware. Again, you don't need to know more detail than that to understand these functions exist within the firmware chipset itself. So whenever you power on a device, whether it's a server or a computer, The first thing kick in is the BIOS or UEFI program or firmware, and then it will get hand over to the operating system to move forward from there. Most computers today give you the option of using UEFI or legacy BIOS, which is called the UEFI CSM. So consider the following associated with those options. UEFI mode is required if the hard drive is larger than 2.2 terabyte or using the GPT partitioning system. UEFI and the GPT partitioning system works only with 64-bit versions of Windows 11, Windows 8 and Windows 7. So this should say Windows 11, 10, 8 and 7. UEFI has a security system called Secure Boot, which helps prevent malware from hijacking a system during or before the operating system load. So UEFI has additional security features that can be enabled by the system administrator that will allow you to secure your system. The only times you might select CSM mode are when you use a legacy MBR hard drive or install a 32-bit version of the Windows 10, 8 or 7 operating systems. So nowadays with the Windows 11, it is recommended that you always go with the 64-bit operating system and use the GPT partitioning method. Remember, Windows can be installed on a GPT partition or MBR partition, partition hard drives, but it is recommended to use GPT partitioning system with a 64-bit install with a Secure Boot turn on as of 2022, because that is the recommended method of installing new operating systems by Microsoft. So this is basically for backward compatibility, that why we have the UEFI CSM in case somebody wants to install 32-bit versions for whatever the reasons. Maybe they have some applications that cannot be run on 64-bit or something like that. Keep in mind that the 64-bit does comes with 32-bit emulator already built into it, so you can run most of the operating programs that are designed for 32-bit on 64-bit Windows 10, 11, 8, 7, etc., etc. Application and hardware compatibility. Device drivers are small programs stored on the hard drive that tells the computer how to communicate with a specific hardware device. So what the device drivers does is basically the manufacturer of your hardware will build a small little program called device drivers that will allow the operating system to communicate with the hardware. This allows compatibility with multiple hardware vendors working together with the Windows operating system. So you can have NVIDIA graphic drivers, you can have Intel network interface cards, and they all can communicate to your Windows operating system because of these device drivers. It is a set of instructions. It's a small program that have a set of instructions on how to communicate between the Windows operating systems and each respective manufacturer's hardware. 32-bit operating systems require 32-bit drivers, while the 64-bit operating systems require 64-bit drivers. Device drivers can be downloaded from the manufacturer's website or found on installation DVDs and USB drives. When installing, be sure to have the correct Windows device drivers for all critical devices, which includes the mouse, keyboards, network interface cards, etc. Also, especially for graphical user interfaces, not graphical user interface, I mean GPU, your graphic card, make sure that you have the correct device drivers, because installing an incorrect device drivers, which is almost next to impossible to do with the Windows 10 and 11 especially, it will give you an error message. But if you manage to do that, you might lose all your graphic graphic card capabilities, and you lose your monitors, for example. That would be horrible. Then you have to reinstall your Windows all over from the beginning. So make sure you install the correct device drivers, even though as of 2022 August, it is impossible to install incorrect device drivers. You will come across an error messages before you screw these things up. But just make sure you are downloading the correct one, so you are doing it right from the beginning. Not sure if the device drivers are going to work with the Windows 11, 10, 8, 7, etc. Then you may be able to also set up a dual boot system, also known as a multi-boot. after installation, you can test the software or hardware. If they work under new operating system, then you can delete the old one and then move forward with that. And with respect to dual boot, there are other reasons why you may want to create a dual boot systems. Let's say you are working for an organization that needs a Windows 7 installation, but they also use Windows 11. So you can install Windows 7 on a one boot and the Windows 11 on another boot, and you can install the software separately. Nowadays, a lot of people don't do that, but you may come across a situation there where you have to. So here's an example of a device such as a video card that comes packaged with its own device drivers on a CD. This is the older EVGA video card. Modern video card may have device drivers that either automatically download as soon as you install it and connect to the internet, or you can download it through their website. Choosing the type of installation. If a hard drive is new, a clean install must be installed because there are no operating systems or partitions created in there. If an operating system is already installed, you have three options: the clean install, in place upgrade, or multi-boot. The clean install overwrites the existing operating system and applications. In the Windows setup program, a clean install is called a custom installation. And the advantage of this is you get a fresh start. So if there are any device drivers, software, or programs that you have already installed in the operating system causing some errors and issues, you can mitigate that. You can fix those things by doing a clean install and then installing one program at a time and testing if any of those programs causing any errors, for example. In-place upgrades is a Windows installation that is launched from the Windows desktop and keeps user settings and install applications from the old operating systems. This requires qualifying operating systems called upgrade paths. For example, if you are moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11, it is possible for you to do in-place upgrade. In fact, probably 90+% of the home users going to be doing in-place upgrades when they are moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11, because it comes with a nice graphical user interface. Microsoft actually push this update through their online Windows updates across to multiple users, and you basically click on a button and follow through some on-screen instructions for in-place upgrades. Multi-boot, you can install Windows in a second partition and create a dual boot situation, which is also known as a multi-boot situation. And you need at least 2 partitions or a second hard drive to do this. And you also need to have enough space on those hard drives in order for you to do these type of multi-boot systems. So keep that in mind when you are configuring multi-boot environments. You need to not only have the partitions created, but you need to make sure that each partition have enough space for it to take up those multi-boot installations. Other tips to keep in mind includes a 64-bit versions of Windows can only be upgraded to a 64-bit operating system. So if you have a 32-bit operating system, you cannot upgrade from 32-bit operating systems to a 64-bit operating system. You had to do a clean install. 32-bit operating system therefore can only be upgraded to 32-bit operating systems, vice versa. If you want to install a 64-bit Windows operating system over 32-bit operating system, as I mentioned, you have to do a clean installation at that time. Choices to make during the installation. The size of the Windows partition. So you can decide not to use all the available space on the drive for Windows partition. The reasons not to use all the available space may include you are planning to install more than one operating systems on the hard drive, creating a dual boot system. That is one of the most common reasons why you would do that. And some people prefer to use more than one partition or volume to organize data on their hard drive. So instead of having C drive taking up the entire hard drive, you can create a C drive and an E drive, where E drive going to be your data space and the C drive going to be your operating system space. And hence doing that, you basically divided your hard drive into 2 parts. We don't typically do that for home users because home users can simply create folders inside, for example, my documents in the C drive. And it doesn't actually have an inherent advantage for any backup or hardware failure reasons, because reason for that is the same hard drive. Putting a second hard drive for your data is better than actually partitioning into two parts, even in a corporate and business environment. But there are some business and corporate applications that require that this type of configurations, and that's why you would do that. So there's two reasons you do that. You're planning to do a dual boot system, or you prefer to have two partitions, one for the C drive with the Windows on it and the other one for data with that specific use case scenarios. But typically we don't do that. We typically just partition the entire hard drive. Network configuration is another thing that you need to take into account. To join a domain, you'll need the network ID and the password assigned to you by the network administrator. To join a home group, you will need the password to the home group. To use a work group, you configure each computer to share its folders and its files specific to those people. And you might need to know how the IP addresses are assigned, whether it's a dynamically assigned, in that way we will keep the system in dynamic, or whether it's a static. So especially this is become a problem or an issue in especially corporate and business environment with IPv4 configurations, because we don't typically do statically assigned IPv6. And again, if you don't know why those are the way that is, I have already gone through extensive network engineering CCNA lectures on my YouTube channel. You can check those things out. But for A+ certification program, just know, you might need to know the IP addresses assignment methodology in a corporate or business environment when you are setting up your end devices, right? Whether it's a dynamic or static. Why sometimes we use static IP addresses with IPv4 and why we usually keep in dynamic in IPv6, you can go and check out my CCNA, CCNP lectures that are on my YouTube channel. Final checklist before beginning the installation. You could ask these questions, does the computer meet the minimum or recommended hardware requirements? You can think about CPU, RAM, a hard drive, partitioning size, free space partitioning size. Do you have the Windows device drivers for your hardware device and application setup CD? So list of those drives, and also you need to make sure those drives that those drivers that you're going to install is compatible with the new operating system. So if you have a drivers for Windows 10 but you're upgrading to Windows 11, but your manufacturer is for that device, let's say an HP printer, is saying, hey, you need a new driver for Windows 11, make sure that you have that driver before you start installing, because your Windows 10 driver is not going to work on Windows 11 in that case. It's not the case in most of the time when you're moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11, but certainly will be the case for certain items when you're moving from Windows 8 to Windows 11, for example, right? You also need to ask the question, do you have the product key available? So it might not be required if you are reinstalling Windows 10 or upgrading your Windows 10 to Windows 11, but you might need the product key if you are doing a fresh install, for example. How will users be recognized on the system? So you need to ask about the home group questions, domain join for network, for corporate and business environment, network ID, etc., etc. You can ask also the questions, things like how will the computer be recognized on the network? So static or dynamic addressing. Will you do an upgrade or clean install? For clean install, are you going to do a dual boot setup or a regular setup in most cases? And have you back up the important data on your hard drive? Even if you are doing an in-place upgrade, I will always back up the data, because things could go wrong during installation. You should never, as an IT technician, ever perform an upgrade on a new install of operating system without backing up the user data, because user data is super important to back up during any time you change anything. Even when you are installing device drivers or upgrading device drivers, I would recommend that you back up before you move forward with those upgrades. General tips for installing Windows also include: verify all application software, DVDs and device drivers are available, or USB keys. Backup all important data. If not, reformatting the drive. Run antivirus software to ensure drive is free from malware. Use BIOS UEFI setup to verify the boot sequence needed for installation. in BIOS UEFI setup, disable any virus protection settings that might prevent the boot area of the drive from being altered. So make sure that you go through all of these setup in the BIOS UEFI and use the UEFI mode or UEFI CMS mode if needed, and make sure you follow through all of these steps before you start installing. For laptops, use AC adapter so you can turn you don't run out of battery, so you can keep the laptop going during the installation process. Verify that you have the Windows 10 or Windows 11 product key, and typically you will purchase a Windows 10 or Windows 11 product key online, and then the key will be emailed to you, or it will go into your Microsoft account. So make sure that you copy those information, or you have another computer that connected to the internet, you can download those keys. If purchased on a USB flash drive, look for the product key printed on the cover of the flash drive case, on the card inside the case, or attached to the back of the Windows documentation booklet. And this is the case especially if you are buying OEM licenses for Windows 10, Windows 11, for example. They will be on a USB flash drive, and the Windows 11 key will be posted on the back of the the documentation booklet. The product key might not be required for reinstallation of Windows, as I mentioned before. For laptops, all-in-one or other brand name computers, the computer manufacturer might have stored the Windows product key on the motherboard firmware itself. In that case, you don't need to enter any information at all. It won't pop up asking you to enter that information. This is an example screenshot of a digital license key, a digital Windows license key that has been purchased through the Microsoft Store, that has been used to activate the Windows 10 Pro. In this case, when you reinstall the Windows 10 Pro, it will automatically get either activated through the internet or ask you to log into your Microsoft account, and then it will get automatically authenticated through the Microsoft server. So in this case, you don't need to worry about the license key, because this license key is a digital license key stored on the Microsoft activation servers. Useful information about an ISO file. An ISO file is an image file of an optical disk, including its file system and all its files and folders. So this ISO file basically came from long ago when we were using actual CDs for most of the operating system installations. Also called an ISO image or disk image as a result. But nowadays the ISO files will be installed onto USB keys, oftentimes bootable USB keys, and then we can use a USB key to install the operating systems. To see the contents of an ISO file, open the File Explorer or Windows Explorer depending on the Windows version you have, then right click the file and click Mount. What Mount going to do is to make that ISO file viewable using the Microsoft operating system. It will assign a drive letter, just like C drive or E drive. If you have another hard drive, for example, or partition, the ISO file will have another drive letter assigned, and now you can browse through the content within that ISO file. If you have an optical drive that can write to DVDs, you can burn a DVD from an ISO file. For Windows 11, Windows 10 and Windows 8, you need to have a DVD CD if you want to do that way. You can do it on a CD because it's too large. And but in modern day, as of 2022, most of us will use those ISO files and burn it into or write it into a USB key that is bootable using something like Rufus, and then we will use that to boot and install your operating system. But keep in mind that the ISO file is basically an image file of an optical disk, which is come from long time ago, and we still use it. It's a legacy technology, but we still use it because it is very efficient and easy to work with. Installing Windows 11, 10, 8.1 or 7. If you have done the homework, Windows installation is very simple. Insert the installation media and boot from it. If you downloaded an ISO file, make sure to use programs like Rufus, as I mentioned before, to create a bootable USB drive. I might do a demonstration on how to do that. It's very easy. You don't need to do much to create a bootable USB drive, but I might do a demonstration if you guys like that. Basically follow the instructions on the screen, and it's in plain English or plain whatever the language you pick, and just go through the process of creating a bootable drive. If you want to know a little bit more about how to install Windows and operating systems, I have already posted some of the demonstrations on my Net IT Geeks YouTube channel. Please go ahead and check it out, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you'll get up-to-date information about new demonstrations that may be helpful to you. But there are videos that already I have posted showing some demonstration on Windows 11 installations as well as Windows Server installations on my YouTube channel. So go ahead and watch those if you are interested in those. Again, you don't need to know much in details for A+ certification program, but you need to know how to do the basics, things like creating an ISO file, creating a bootable file from ISO. Multi-boot installations. A multi-boot installation is also known as a dual boot installation. What happens in this situation is each OS must have its own hard drive partition with enough free space to hold the operating system with room for applications, data, and OS working space. So each operating system should have a different partition, and each should have enough space on the hard drive not only to install the operating system itself, but also your device drivers and whatever the data that the users will be working on either boot system, right? For the steps to set up a dual boot system includes the making the installation of Windows 10 or 11, leaving the allocated space for the other Windows partition. So you can install either Windows 10 or Windows 11 or whatever the Windows version first, and you're going to leave some space for the other partition. So you're only going to use part of your hard drive, not the entire hard drive. So when you are doing the very first step, you need to make sure you don't use up your entire hard drive. You only use up enough hard drive space just to for the applications and files and everything for the first installation of the operating system. Then to install the Windows 10 or 11, whatever the one you're going to install next, make sure you have a second partition with enough unallocated space, and then start the Windows 10 or 11 installation, whichever the one you're going to pick for the second partition, by booting from that particular operating system bootable drive, and then installing on that separate partition. And finally, you're going to select the partition or unallocated space to hold that installation and go through the installation process just like you did at the very beginning. I know these texts can be confusing. Basically, imagine you pick Windows 10 here, and then you install Windows 10 here, and then you pick the Windows 11 here for the next partition, and you're going to complete that setup for Windows 11 just like you completed on Windows 10 here. So depending on whether you install Windows 10 first or Windows 11 first, these are interchangeable. And you don't have to worry about this, how to do this much, because I have already done a multi-boot or dual boot demonstration on my YouTube channel, and I will leave a link in the description of this video, as well as I will post a card on the top right hand corner so that you can go ahead and watch that video. So basically what you need to do is that during the second installation process, you need to pick the space on your hard drive that is not allocated for your primary operating system, and then install your secondary operating systems there. So again, I will leave a link to this video in the description as well as a card on the top right hand corner, so you can go ahead and watch that if you're interested in learning how to do a dual boot system step by step. Solving problems with installations. Use an upgrade key, product key on a new hard drive. Sometimes you might need to use the upgrade key to install Windows when replacing a hard drive. The Windows 11 can be activated by upgrading your valid Windows 10 key. So basically you can use your Windows 10 key to upgrade to Windows 11 even with a fresh install. Microsoft allow that. You basically need to make sure that you have your Windows 10 key available to you, and you can download a fresh copy of Windows 11 and you can install it and upgrade it using that. The first free release of Windows 10 can be activated using Windows 8.1, Windows 8 or Windows 7 product keys. However, for the versions 16 or 7 or later, reinstall Windows 10 by logging in with your Microsoft account and activating the Windows using the activation troubleshooter in the settings app, because it won't be able to do that automatically after version 16 or 7 of Windows 10. In situations where a Windows 7 system was upgraded to Windows 8.0 and then updated to Windows 8.1, you have to reinstall the Windows 7, reinstall Windows 8.0 using the upgrade product key and activate the Windows 8, and then download and install Windows 8.1 upgrade. So that's what you need to do that. Repair a damaged hard drive. Beside disport, you can also use the format command. Two types of formats include the quick format and full format. The quick format will create an empty root directory for a volume. The full format, which creates an empty root directory, checks each sector on the volume for errors and marks bad sectors so they will not be used by the file system. If you suspect the hard drive is damaged and Windows will not start, launch the command prompt Windows from the Windows setup media and perform a full format. You can do it through in the pre-installation environment when you install it. The pre-installation environment is the environment that you get when you first try to install of the operating system. It will typically have a blue screen or something, and that's where you can launch the command prompt to do those items. Again, I might go through this in real life lab demonstrations on my YouTube channel later sometime. What to do after a Windows installation? After installing Windows, do the following: verify network access, activate Windows, install Windows updates and verify update settings and malware settings, install hardware, set up user accounts and transfer or restore user data, and perform any backups to the new system so that system preferences and user preferences are done accordingly. Install applications, turn Windows features on or off depending on whatever you want to do with this device. And for laptops, use control panel to configure power management settings, which actually can be done on desktop devices as well, like when to go to sleep, for example, but it is very important to do it on laptops. Right? So keep that in mind. Also make sure the device drivers and everything has been installed properly as well. Verifying network access. The first step you need to do is to make sure a wired connection is done properly. So plug in the network cable and let the Windows do the rest. So it should automatically obtain DHCP if you are connected to a DHCP system. Keep that in mind. If you need static IP address, that will not work. But in that case, you need to go to the IP settings and give an IP address, and then the Windows will take care of the rest. To create a wireless connection, click the network icon in the taskbar and select the wireless network. May need to enter a password to enter the Wi-Fi network, and typically in 99% of cases, Wi-Fi networks do not use static IP addresses, so it has to have a DHCP pool that will assign the IP addresses for your Windows device you just installed. Next thing we need to do is to verify that you have access to the local network. Open File Explorer or Windows Explorer and verify that you can access the other computers or see the other computers on the network. This is especially useful in home environments or private network environment. This is not the case if it is a public environment, and I have already explained those differences in my previous lecture. Then you need to verify the internet access. Open Internet Explorer and try to navigate to a website. And if a problem arises, consider that the problem might be that you need to install the drivers for the motherboard, onboard network port, or the network interface card. IP addresses, wireless network or network security settings may be wrong, so you need to look into those things as well. And again, if you open up a web browser and you don't have access to the websites or internet, but if you open up command prompt and you ping Google server, for example 8.8.8.8, and you can ping the Google server directly, but doesn't have access to or cannot ping google.com, that may be your DNS server. Again, I'm not going into detail on network troubleshooting in this lecture, but those are the things that you can do as a IT technician. Activating Windows. Microsoft requires product activation. So ensure a valid Microsoft license has been purchased either through electronic means or through hard copy. If you enter a product key using installation, Windows is already activated because it will get activated through using that product key. To view activations status, open the settings app, select the upgrade and security group, and then select activation. This is for Windows 10 and Windows 11 is similar. The problem with activations includes replacing a failed hard drive, upgrading the motherboard, replacing a failed motherboard, upgrading Windows 8 Home to Windows 10 Pro, and reinstalling Windows 10 Pro. So those are some of the problems that you may run into. These are the most common situations. And same with if you upgrade directly from Windows 8 to Windows 11, that may create an activation issue. Again, you may be able to bypass that either through downloading a activation troubleshooting application from Windows, or by contacting Windows customer support. So here is a example of somebody viewing the activation in Windows 10, and you can see the Windows is not activated here, and there's a red text saying it is not activated. You can either change the product key or go to the Microsoft Store to actually purchase any product key if you want to purchase one. Installing Windows updates. Windows 11 and 10 updates automatically by default. To apply any pending Windows 10 or even Windows 11 updates, open Settings app and click Updates and Security Group. In the Windows Update window, view the update status and install any available updates. You might click Restart Now to finish the update, installing updates. Click Install Now to install available updates, or click Check for updates if no updates are available. To do this, you need to have an internet connection, otherwise this process will fail. Tools to manage update settings include Settings app, Group Policy, which is pushed by the Active Directory Domain Controller, for example, and Registry Editor. Options for managing updates from Settings app include View or Uninstall an update, Schedule, Restart, and Active Hours, update other Microsoft products and Windows features, such as, for example, Microsoft Office can be installed through the Microsoft updates itself, and defer or pause updates. You can even pause updates for a couple of months or weeks even. And this is true for even Windows 11 as well, so keep that in mind. And here is a screenshot of checking for updates on a Windows 11 on the left hand side and checking for update on a Windows 10 on the right hand side. So these are like an example of checking updates for Windows 11 and Windows 10, and they're all under Settings app in both Windows 11 here and Windows 10 here. Malware protections is another thing that is associated with Windows updates. Windows includes its own pre-installed anti-malware software called Windows Defender antivirus, and in Windows 11 and Windows 10 it is called Windows Defender. This is wrong. So Windows includes its own pre-installed anti-malware software called Windows Defender antivirus, and in Windows 11 and Windows 10 it is called Windows Defender. It doesn't have the antivirus part in it, so that's why part in certain. So it's basically Microsoft changing the name. It's the same thing. It's just basically Windows Defender, whether it's Windows 11, 10, 8 or 7. To verify the utility is running in Windows 11, you open the settings and then click Privacy and Security and click on the Windows Security, and that's how you navigate there. And then you're going to click Open Windows Security, which is a separate app that will open on your Windows 11. So you go to Settings of your Windows 11, Privacy and Security. Under Windows Security, you're going to click up the Open Windows Security, and that will open a separate app associated with Windows 11 security options. To verify utility is running on Windows 10, you open the Control panel this time and then click Security and Maintenance and expand the security group, and that will give you the access to the Windows Defender. To verify the protection in Windows 8, you basically launch the Windows Defender from the Start screen or menu, and on the Settings tab, you can verify real-time protection is turned on, and that's how you verify on Windows 8. So they're slightly different from Windows 11 to 10 to 8, but basically all of them are Windows Defender pretty much. So it's the same Windows Defender that has been improved by Microsoft from operating system to operating system, next generation to next generation. Installing hardware. Devices that were not automatically installed during the installation must be installed properly. As you install each device, reboot and verify operation before moving on to the next device. This is something a lot of technicians, a lot of IT technicians forget. Even engineers forget that. They start installing whole bunch of device drivers and devices and then reboot the whole thing at the end. Yeah, it will keep your system downtime to a minimum, but that may also result in a feedback loop of multiple devices failing at the same time, or one device failing causing the other device to fail, etc, etc. It is always recommended that you install each device and reboot and verify operation before moving on to the next device. Even on Windows servers, if this is possible, I know it may affect multiple users, it is recommended to install one device driver or one device at a time. You may need to do the following: install the drivers for the motherboard, install the drivers that came with the video card, for example, and use all the features of the card offers. You need to have those drivers installed. Install printers. For other hardware devices, read and follow the manufacturer directions for installation. In addition to that, I would also recommend, if there are any specialized software or programs that have been provided to you by these manufacturers, you should go ahead and install them as well. For example, NVIDIA has their own NVIDIA GeForce software suite, and I would recommend that you install those software suite so that you will have the additional capabilities associated with your video card. So in addition to drivers, you can also install the software associated with it. Use Device Manager. So Device Manager is the primary Windows tool for managing hardware. You can disable or enable a device, update its drivers, uninstall a device, and undo a driver update. To access Device Manager, use the following methods. For Windows 11, 10 and 8, right click the start menu. So on the start menu, just right click on the start menu and it will give you a different set of menu options. And on there, select the device driver, and that will, Device Manager, and that will open up the Device Manager. So the Device Manager is the primary Windows tool for managing hardware, and the easiest way to access is on Windows 11, 10 and 8 is to right click on the start menu and just click open the Device Manager. Open the system window and then click Device Manager is another option. You can also enter dev mgmt.msc command on Windows 10, 11 and 7 search box or the Windows 8 run box, and that will open the Device Manager as well. They should say Windows 11, 10 and 7 search box. The ways to use Device Manager to solve problems include uninstall and reinstall devices, look for error messages offered by the Device Manager, and update or roll back device drivers. And here is a screenshot of the Device Manager on Windows 11 Professional. This is the same for all Windows 11 installation, and Windows 10, 8 and 7 have the similar looks and feel. It just doesn't have these rounded corners and stuff, but it has a similar listing. So Device Manager has not changed much from Windows 7 to 8 to Windows 10 to 11. So it all looks the same. So in here, I am actually picking the network adapter. I expand the network adapter. I select the network adapter I want to update. I right click and click properties, and it'll give me this option. And under driver, I have the option for driver details, driver update, and bunch of other options. So this is what I'm showing here on this screenshot. Setting up user accounts. Types of user account and privileges associated with them. The scope of user account, where Windows offer 3 types of user account, differ from the local account to network ID account to Microsoft account. So basically it changes the scope based on the type of account that you pick. The local account created on the local computer and is recognized only on the local computer itself. Like for example in here, if we go a little bit back here, I can show you. Right here it says a local account. Right here it says local account. That because of this Sanuja Senanayake account only associated with this computer and this computer only. So it is not attached to any Windows, anything, online account, etc., etc. So that's what make it a local account. Network ID is a professional and business edition type account that allows a user to sign into the Windows with a network ID and password created and maintained on a Windows domain in Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. That's where the Active Directory domain controllers come into play. Again, it is not part of your A+ certification program, but I already have posted a demonstration on how to do Active Directory domain controllers on my YouTube channel if you're interested in that. Microsoft account for Windows 11, 8, 10 and 8, in that situation, what happened is an email address initially set up by the Microsoft website, especially on live.com, or you can actually go to microsoft.com to set up as well nowadays. And that gives you the access to several types of online accounts, and you can associate or link Microsoft account to a local account or network ID. So you can have a local account or a network ID account, and then you can associate that with the Microsoft account as well, or you can directly sign on with the Microsoft account. Privileges for accounts include the administrator account or the standard account. Use a Microsoft account with Windows 11, 10 and 8. You can associate your local account with your Microsoft account or set up Windows to sign in with your Microsoft account in order to get easy access to Microsoft resources in the cloud. Anyone with administrative rights to the computer can access your Microsoft private settings, apps, online account, and OneDrive stored on the local computer. So keep that in mind. For Windows 11, open the Settings app. Click Accounts from the left hand pane and then click Your Info, then click Sign in with the Microsoft account instead, and that will link your local account to the Microsoft account. For Windows 10, open the Settings app, click Users, and then click Sign in with Microsoft account instead, and then follow the directions on the screen again in here, and that will link your local account to your Windows 10 account. For Windows 8, open the Charms bar, select the settings charm, select change PC settings, click accounts, select your account, and then click connect to Microsoft account, and then follow the instructions on the screen, and that will connect your local account to the Microsoft account. So here is an example of a those settings that on the left hand side you will see that the accounts options under your info on the Windows 11, and here is the Windows 10 which is under settings, accounts, your info, and you have that option sign in with a Microsoft account instead right here, and in here we have the sign in with the Microsoft account instead right here. So this is the Windows 11 and the Windows 10. As you can see, they are very similar to each other. There's not much change between Windows 10 and Windows 11. As you consider the differences among the accounts, consider where the account is authenticated. A local account is authenticated on the local computer and gives access to the local computer, while a network ID is authenticated by a computer on the network, which gives access to the local computer and resources on the Windows domain. So the network ID accounts are basically authenticated through Active Directory domain controllers, or known as the domain controllers. A Microsoft account is authenticated on live.com website, which gives access to the local computer and online resources. A Microsoft account can be a standard account or an administrator account. It can be associated with a network ID, so that can sign in with the Microsoft account and can be authenticated to a Windows network as well as a live.com. So it can have both domain controller option as well as the online options associated with it. User account control dialog box. Purposes of the user account control, also known as UAC dialog box, includes to prevent malicious background tasks from gaining administrative privileges when the administrator is signed in. So if you are signed in as an administrator, the UAC will prevent any other applications from running administrative tasks by creating that user account control dialog box. To make it easier for administrator to sign in using a less powerful user account for normal desktop activities but still be able to perform administrative tasks while signing as a regular user can also be be facilitated using the user account control, UAC. You can control how the UAC works. So in the control panel, click user accounts and click change user account control settings to manage those options so that you can manage how the UAC dialog box will pop up. But in general, I would recommend keeping it at the default, for especially for home users. So just install and don't even go in here and change any of those settings, because that will give them the maximum protection from unauthorized administrative tasks being executed. So you may have seen this dialog box. So the user account control box of an administrator does not require an administrative password. So it will give you a pop-up like this, and you just need to say yes or no because you are logged in as the administrator. But the UAC box of a standard user will give you the option to enter the administrative user account information when the pop-up shows up, because it will give you a place to enter that information. And once if that information is authenticated, then you can click yes. Otherwise, if you click yes, it won't let that standard user execute this particular task. And here's a pop-up of a Windows 11 machine. As you can see, it's very similar. It's exactly the same. In fact, it just have the rounded corners, and I have the dark mode enabled in this Windows 11. That's why it's dark. Otherwise, it will look similar to this. So that's what it look like. So here is these two shows how it will show up as an administrator, where a UAC pop-up comes up, the user account control. And here it shows what happened if the user, non-administrator, does the same thing. In that case, it will give you the option to authenticate. Windows provide options for a UAC control box. Here's an example of that. That's where I said you don't need to change these options for most end users as a A+ certified technician. But there are situations in corporate and business environments, or even your end client environment, you may have to change it, and this is how you do it. Installing applications. Before installing an application, consider system requirements, compatibility with the operating systems, impact to the network performance, impact to the device security, and local user permissions. Applications can be installed from a CD, DVD, or USB drive, from a downloaded application file, directly from the website, from the Windows 10, 11, 8 Windows Store, or Microsoft Store in Windows 11, or from a folder shared by another computer on the network. So basically, sorry about that, it's kind of confusing. So Windows 8 and 10 call the Windows Store, and the Windows 11 is called the Microsoft Store. Again, it's just Microsoft rebranding things. Microsoft Store and Windows Store is exactly the same thing. So for Windows 8 and Windows 8 and 10, you will be going to Windows Store to download some certain applications, but in Windows 11 we will be going to Microsoft Store, which is exactly the same thing, to download certain items. So these are the options. You can use CD, DVD, USB, flash drive, download application directly from a manufacturer's website, or you can go to the Microsoft Store or the Windows Store to download it. Use File Explorer or Windows Explorer depending on the operating system you have. Again, Microsoft rebranding things here. And double click the setup program file. When installing from the web, click the link on the website, follow the on-screen directions, and you will need administrative privileges to install these programs when you do that. So keep that in mind. Uninstalling applications for Windows 11, open the settings, click apps and right click the pane, and then go to apps and features and find the applications to uninstall under the app list. For Windows 10 8.7, open control panel and click programs and features. And for Windows 10, you can also go right click the start menu and press Windows X or app, and then go to apps and features. And Windows 8, you can do the right click and start menu and go to this feature. So basically these are listing how you can uninstall, and I'm not going to go through them anymore because you probably have done this million times, and it's already on the screen. You can read it yourself. So I might do some demonstration on my YouTube channel, but even that I don't think it's necessary because it's such a simple thing to do. Turning Windows features on or off. So to save on Windows resources, by turning off Windows features you will not use. So by default, certain features of Windows are still there in your operating system, but turn off by Microsoft. So, but there are situations you may have to turn some certain features on. If there is a situation arise like that, it's most likely going to be the corporate or business environment, but you may come across those situations at home environments as well. So to do that, what you need to do, in the left pane of the Programs and Features window, click Turn Windows Features on or off, or type Turn Windows Features on or off in the built-in search. Especially in Windows 11 and Windows 10, you can simply type Turn Windows Features on or off, and that you'll get to that app really fast. Check or uncheck the features you want or don't want, and then click OK. Sometimes you need a restart for those features to take into effect, and make one last check that all is well, and document what you did, because if something goes wrong by either turning on or turning off a feature, you now can go back and do the reverse to fix your system if something goes wrong. Here is a screenshot of Windows feature on-off window that you get on Windows 11. This is similar to what you will get on Windows 10. As you can see, there are multiple programs such as Hyper-V and many other things that you can turn on or off. SMB, for example, Telnet, a TFTP client, etc., etc. But you don't need most of these features in many situations, so you only need to turn it on when needed. Turn on only the features that will be using. Again, I'm going to highlight that. Turn only the features that you will be using. You're only going to turn on the one that you need, that will make sure that your system won't get bogged down. Do not turn off features without understanding the purpose of the feature. Because if you randomly start turning off, for example, .NET Framework 4.8 advanced services, right? That could lead to programs malfunctioning. Because .NET Framework, for example, being used by multiple softwares and programs and even device drivers. So by turning some of those features off, that might break your operating system. So make sure that you do not turn off features without understanding the purpose of those features, especially the default features that are turned on by default by Microsoft. Concerns when working in large enterprise. Working as an IT support technician in a large corporate environment is different from working in a small company or with individuals. So in this part of this lecture, we introduce you to how Windows is installed on computer on an enterprise. Those are called deployment strategies. And beginning with Windows 10, Microsoft expanded the method it offers to deploy Windows in an enterprise environment. So we are not going into advanced detail in this lecture. We are going into a broad overview in a couple of slides because we don't want to keep this as short as possible. Methods to deploy a standard image. So in a corporate environment, a standard image contains the entire Windows volume in a single Windows imaging, also known as WIM file, and that has a .wim file extension. Installing Windows on a computer via a standard image is called image deployment in that enterprise environment. A standard image is hardware independent. A standard image is created in a process called drive imaging. Deploying a standard image always result in a clean install rather than an upgrade, and you can install multiple end clients in a one go method with this type of installation, and it requires a Windows server. Image deployment can be started using one of these methods: local installation, network installation, or push automation. So in the local installation, can use a bootable flash drive or DVD that contains the image. A Windows pre-installation environment, also known as Windows PE, is launched, and this is a minimum OS use to start the installation. That is the minimum what we need to install the operating system. Network installation is and push installations are the two most common methods in the large enterprise environment, where boot in the network installation, the boot to the network and deploy the image from the server. So it's a network located image that being used to install the operating system. In the push automation, a technician does not start the image deployment. The entire remote network installation is automated and no user intervention is required. That's where some of your corporate offices, where computers will be turned on overnight and you push the operating system updates and upgrades through your Windows server to those end clients. An unattended installation uses an answer file where responses are stored. So you can actually create an answer file for any of the pop-ups that might come up during the installation process. So nobody needs to be, need to be there to install those things. So you can install the operating system overnight, for example, or operating system upgrades overnight. Using USMT software. The state migration tool, also known as USMT, can be used when deploying Windows in a Windows domain. Copies user files and settings from one computer to another. What to expect when using the USMT commands includes the scan state, load state, and USMT util state. So the scan state is basically copies the user settings and files from the source computer to a safe location. The load state applies these settings and files to the destination computer, and USMT utils basically provides the encryption options and hard drive management. These command lines can be lengthy, so most likely the commands are stored in a batch files provided by the system administrator. Again, the user state migration tool, also known as USMT, is a little bit more advanced than what is needed for your A+ certification program. I'm just putting this out here just so you have a little bit of more comprehensive knowledge about how to do these items for your future careers. That's everything for today. If you like these type of lectures, please thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel. Good luck with your exams and have a nice day.